All right, so welcome to another deep dive with us.
Yeah,
You know how this works by now.
I hope
We
so.
take something one of you is curious about, some topic or story that's got you thinking, and we dive deep.
Yeah, exactly.
Really extract those golden nuggets so you don't have
You're
to.
right to the good stuff.
And this time it's all thanks to a listener who wrote in after their high school reunion in Chicago.
Oh, interesting.
Apparently the big topic of conversation was how much life has changed since those carefree high school days.
I mean, makes sense, right? We all go through that.
Totally.
Yeah.
But one classmate, Nathan, he was really hung up on how much humans just resist change, even when it's staring them in the face.
That fear of the unknown.
Yeah. And then another classmate, Michael, he said he had a whole new perspective on it, all thanks to this simple story he'd read.
Oh, I love that kind of stuff.
Me too.
Yeah.
And apparently it changed how he approached his work and his personal life too. So that's what we're going to dig into today.
All right, I'm intrigued. Lay it on me.
So we've got the text of the story itself. It's called Who Moved My Cheese?
Yeah.
Pretty catchy title.
Yeah, I've heard of that one.
And we've also got a summary of how all the classmates reacted to it, which is super interesting.
So 2 layers here. The story itself and then how real people connected with it.
Exactly. So first we got to unpack this story, Who Moved My Cheese? Then we'll see what life lessons the reunion crew took away from it and what it might mean for you listening right now.
Sounds like a plan.
All right, so picture this. You're at this reunion in Chicago. Everyone's catching up, and there's this underlying theme of life throwing curveballs, job changes, kids growing up, relationships ending, that kind of
It's
stuff.
not happening.
Exactly. And a lot of these classmates felt like they hadn't handled those changes as well as they could have.
Makes sense. We've all been there.
And that's when Michael brings up this story, Who Moved My Cheese? Like it's this big revelation.
All right, so what's the story all about?
It's about 4 characters living in this maze, constantly searching for cheese.
Okay, I'm listening.
2 of them are mice, Sniff and Scurry, and they're portrayed as pretty simple, just going with their instinct.
So like just reacting to the situation?
Yeah, and then there are 2 little people, Hem and Haw.
Little people.
Yeah, they look like mice, but they think and feel like humans, all those complicated emotions and beliefs.
Oh, I see. So representing us.
Exactly.
Okay, so mice and little people all running around a maze looking for cheese?
And the cheese, that's the key here for the mice. It's literal cheese, the stuff they eat.
Right.
But for Hem and Haw, it's cheese. With a capital C, it represents whatever makes them happy and successful in life.
Oh, I get it. So like a fulfilling job or a loving relationship.
Exactly. Or even just feeling secure in the world,
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So their whole daily routine is about finding this cheese in the maze. And the maze itself is a great metaphor, isn't it?
For sure. All those twists and turns and dead ends we encounter in life.
Totally. So anyway, eventually all 4 of them find this massive pile of their ideal cheese at a place called Cheese Station C.
Okay, so they hit the jackpot.
Right? And this is where their habits start to change. Sniff and Scurry, even with this huge supply. They keep doing their thing, staying alert, sniffing around just in case.
Smart mice.
Right. They even keep their running shoes handy, like they're ready to move at a moment's notice.
Always prepared.
But Hem and Haw, they get comfortable.
The danger zone.
Oh yeah, they start sleeping in, taking it easy because they know the cheese is there. They take it for granted.
I can see that happening.
And they even build their whole lives around Cheese Station C. Move their homes closer, make friends there.
So they become completely dependent on it.
Exactly. They start seeing it as something they deserve, something they earned, not just something they found.
That sense of entitlement can be dangerous.
Totally. And they even decorate the walls with these cheesy little sayings.
Like what?
Things like, having cheese makes you happy.
Oh, boy.
So you could probably guess what happens next.
Let me guess the cheese disappears.
You got it one morning, Sniff and Scurry arrive at Cheese Station C, and it's empty. But because they were paying attention to the declining supply, they weren't totally shocked. They put on their running shoes and immediately set off to find new cheese.
Just like that.
No drama, no complaining, just pure adaptation.
Those mice are pretty wise.
Right. But for Hem and Haw, the empty cheese station is a total disaster.
I bet.
Hammond totally freaks out, yelling, "No cheese!" Like, he can't believe it.
Oh, the denial.
And his first reaction is to demand, "Who moved my cheese?" Like it's someone's fault.
Classic blame game.
Meanwhile, Haw is just stunned, standing there in disbelief.
I can imagine that feeling of shock when something you relied on suddenly vanishes.
Totally. And And for them, the cheese was so much more than just a need. It was tied to their whole sense of well-being and identity.
Right, it represented different things to each of them.
Yeah, like for Ha, it was about feeling safe, having a family, a comfortable home.
And for him?
For him, it was about control and status, being the big cheese.
Okay, so because it meant so much to them, they get stuck trying to figure out why it's gone instead of focusing on what to do next.
Exactly so. While Sniff and Scurry are already out there exploring new possibilities, Hem and Haw are stuck at the empty cheese station feeling like victims.
Stuck in the past.
Totally. But as Haw starts thinking about the future, all those plans they made based on this Tadira, she's a little seed of doubt starts to grow.
He's starting to see the reality.
Yeah, and that night he writes on the wall, the more important your cheese is to you, the more you want to hold on to it.
Wow, that's pretty deep.
Right. It captures how we cling to what we value even when it's not good for us anymore.
So true.
The next day they go back to the empty station, still hoping the cheese will magically reappear.
Oh, the hope.
Hem is busy analyzing everything, convinced they deserve the cheese back, because it wasn't their fault it disappeared.
Still stuck in that blame mindset.
But Ha is starting to get this feeling that maybe they should start looking for something new.
He's coming around.
But Hem is totally resistant. He likes the comfort of the familiar, even if it's empty.
The fear of change is powerful.
He sees the maze as this scary, unpredictable place.
I mean, it is a maze after all.
True. So while Hem stays put, Sniff and Scurry are already miles ahead. They found a brand new, even bigger supply of cheese at Cheese Station N.
So there's always new cheese out there.
Exactly. But you got to be willing to look for it.
Okay, so the mice just act while the little people get stuck in their heads.
It's such a great illustration of how differently we all cope with change.
For sure, some people just adapt while others overthink everything.
And eventually, both Hem and Haw are feeling the effects of not having any cheese. They're hungry, stressed out.
The consequences of inaction.
That's when Ha really starts thinking about Sniff and Scurry, picturing them happily munching on new cheese.
And that starts to shift his mindset.
Totally.
Yeah.
Have you ever found that just imagining a positive outcome can give you the motivation to make a change?
Oh, absolutely. Visualization is powerful.
So Ha has this epiphany and says to Hem, let's go. But Hem is still frozen by fear, clinging to his sense of entitlement. He's too old. It's too risky.
All this excuse.
So Ha realizes he can't just wait around. He has to laugh at the absurdity of it all and take action.
He finally breaks free.
And before he leaves, he writes another message on the wall for him. If you do not change, you can become extinct.
Pretty stark warning.
Right. It highlights the consequences of refusing to adapt.
Adapt or die.
Exactly.
All right.
So Ha takes a deep breath and steps back into the maze, wondering why he didn't do this sooner.
We've all been there putting off necessary change.
And his journey isn't easy. At first, he's weak from hunger. The maze seems more daunting than he remembers.
But he keeps going.
He does, because he knows taking uncomfortable action is better than staying stuck in a comfortable but unsustainable situation.
Gotta get out of that comfort zone.
And along the way, he writes another message. Smell the cheese often, so you know when it is getting old.
That's such good advice.
Isn't it? It's a reminder to pay attention to the signs that things are changing around us.
So we're not caught off guard.
Exactly. Hal finds some empty cheese stations along the way, which is discouraging, but he keeps reminding himself he's in control.
That feeling of agency is important.
And he realizes the cheese at Station C didn't just vanish overnight. It was slowly dwindling. He just wasn't paying attention because he was so comfortable.
Complacency strikes again.
Then he asks himself this powerful question. What would you do if you weren't afraid?
Love that.
It pushes him past his fear and into action, and he even starts to enjoy the process of searching.
That's a great shift.
He writes, when you move beyond your fear, you feel free.
So true.
And that freedom leads to more positive thinking. He starts picturing himself enjoying this amazing new cheese, and that motivates him even further.
The power of visualization.
He writes, imagining myself enjoying new cheese even before I find it leads me to it.
It's like manifesting.
And eventually he finds Cheese Station N, and it's full of delicious new cheese. Cheese and Sniff and Scurry are already there, happy as can be.
Success.
He even goes back to try and convince him to join him, brings back some of the new cheese as proof. But him is still stuck wanting the old familiar cheese even though it's gone.
Wow, some people are just resistant to change.
Hall's disappointed, but he understands Hem has to make his own choices.
Yeah, you can lead a horse to water, but...
And he keeps learning from his experience, realizing it wasn't just about finding new cheese, but about not letting fear paralyze him.
Overcoming that fear is key.
He writes more messages, summarizing his lessons.
Bulk.
The quicker you let go of old cheese, the sooner you find new cheese.
Okay.
It is safer to search in the maze than remain in a cheeseless situation.
Got it.
Old beliefs do not lead you to new cheese. And noticing small changes early helps you adapt to the bigger changes that are to come.
So those are some solid takeaways.
Aren't they? And in the end, Haw settles in at Cheese Station Inn, with Sniff and Scurry reflecting on his journey and the lessons he's learned.
In him.
The story ends with Haw hearing some movement in the maze, and he's hopeful that maybe Hem is finally ready to move with the cheese.
A little bit of hope.
So that's the story Michael shared with his classmates.
And how did they react?
It sounds like it really resonated with them. Angela immediately asked who they identified with the most.
Good question.
Carlos admitted he saw himself in Hemmer resisting a job change because he thought he had good reasons why it shouldn't be happening to him.
We all rationalize our resistance sometimes.
Frank mentioned a colleague who was in total denial about their department being shut down, just like him.
Oh, yeah. Clinging to the past.
Jessica said she felt like her cheese had been moved multiple times throughout her career.
That's relatable.
And Nathan, the one who brought up the struggle with change in the first place, sadly realized his family business had been like him, failing to adapt to competition and now facing store closures.
That's tough.
Laura had a great point, though, wondering how she could be more like Haw, so adaptable.
I like that perspective.
And they all realize that we tend to think other people are more afraid of change than we are.
It's always easier to see it in others.
Right. Then Michael shared how he actually used the new cheese concept in his own company to help people embrace change.
Interesting. How did that go?
He said it was really helpful, especially for people who felt like the changes were being forced on them.
That makes sense. Change is harder when you feel powerless.
And he said it led to positive outcomes for everyone involved, both those who left the company and those who stayed.
So a win-win.
Jessica also reflected on how she used to resist technology in her encyclopedia business, clinging to that old way of doing things.
Oh, yeah. The classic, we've always done it this way mentality.
And then Carlos joked about having maze time, like a dedicated time for exploring new possibilities.
I love that.
And Frank realized he needed to lighten up a bit, not take himself too seriously, just like Hall learned to laugh at his own stubbornness.
A little humor goes a long way.
Then they talked about what happened to Hemley. Elaine was optimistic that he'd eventually figure it out, but Corey, based on his experience with patients, was a bit more pessimistic.
Both sides of the coin.
And then Nathan asked this really important question. What do we need to let go of, and what do we need to move on to?
That's a powerful question for all of us.
It is, and you could hear the regret in his voice about not making changes sooner in his business.
Hindsight is 20/20.
Laura connected Haw's message, savor the adventure and move with the cheese, to the idea of being proactive about seeking out new opportunities.
So don't just wait for change to happen, go find it.
Exactly. Even Richard, who was initially skeptical and saw the story as just a business thing, had a breakthrough when he realized it applied to his personal life, too.
How so?
He had recently gone through a separation, and his kids were resisting the changes to their family life. He realized he needed to help them see their new cheese.
That's a great application.
And Elaine and Corey even talked about how the old cheese, new cheese idea applies to relationships. Sometimes it's about letting go of bad habits, not the whole relationship.
Right, sometimes you need to find new cheese within the same cheese station.
Becky shared a story about her son being upset about moving to a new house, but eventually it became a positive experience for him.
So it's all about how you frame the change.
Exactly. And Jessica said she was going to use the story with her own family, and Frank wanted to share it with friends transitioning out of the military.
Spreading the wisdom.
Michael then explained how the story gave his company a neutral way to talk about difficult changes.
It takes the emotion out of it.
And he said, visualizing the new cheese helped people overcome their fear and actually led to better outcomes.
That makes sense. If you can see the positive result, it's easier to make the change.
And it created a culture of problem solving. Instead of complaining, people would say, they just moved our cheese. Let's look for the new cheese.
I love that.
Michael also pointed out how peer pressure can influence our resistance to change. He said in his company, people changed because no one wanted to look like him.
That's hilarious.
Right. And they even used the new cheese idea to attract new business partners, framing change as a good thing.
Smart marketing.
And Jessica ended the conversation by saying, well, it's time for me to leave this cheese station and find some new cheese.
She's ready to take action.
So there you have it, a simple story about cheese but with some really profound lessons about change.
So to sum it all up, what are the key takeaways for our listener?
Well, first, change is inevitable. It's going to happen whether we like it or not.
True.
Second, our resistance to change usually comes from fear of the unknown and attachment to the past. That old cheese.
We all have our old cheese.
And finally, adapting quickly to change and embracing the adventure of finding new cheese is crucial for growth, both personally and professionally.
It's about being like sniff and scurry, always sniffing out new opportunities.
Exactly. And it's amazing how this story with mice and little people gives us a way to understand and talk about change without feeling judged.
It's a simple framework for a complex issue.
So here's a final thought for you listening.
Okay.
What is your cheese? Are you smelling it often enough to know if it's getting old?
That's a good one.
Take some time to think about the areas in your life where you might be holding on to something that's no longer serving you.
What could your new cheese be?
What possibilities are out there waiting for you if you're willing to venture out into the maze?
Food for thought.
Thanks for joining us on another deep dive.
Until next time.
Keep searching for that new cheese.
You got it!